People often ask me what equipment I would choose if I was going to open my own cafe.
The question I want to ask you is, well, first question.
Today, I'm going to talk you through what kind of cafe I would open, what equipment I would choose. I'm going to think about my budget, the location, and all of the different factors that go into making this big decision for my cafe. So stick around, I'll talk you through the whole thing. Now, in order for me to think about what equipment I'm going to choose, I have to think about what my dream cafe is. And we once shot a video, Luke and I sat down and we talked through what kind of cafe we would open.
And thinking ahead, what kind of cafe would you actually open this year?
We'll put a link to that video so you can check that out. It was a really popular video. A lot of people ask me about it and they refer to it. So definitely check it out. So where would I start? If you watch that video, I don't think I've really changed my mind too much from that place. I've still got young kids, I've got a young family. I want the weekends off. So I'm actually going to stick to the hole in the wall concept. I'm going to make sure that our coffee is fast. Obviously the quality of that coffee has to be really high, and we have to look for an opportunity in a major area, maybe a CBD or something with really high foot traffic. That's potentially going to have a higher rent, but I'm going to offset that with good volume by pumping out high quality coffee in a busy area. So that's going to give me the lifestyle I want. You know, would I do a main down by the beach cafe that runs 7 days a week if earning capacity? Maybe. And if I wanted to take on that responsibility with staff, maybe. But in this case, I'm going to keep it nice and simple, small team, and I'd probably be on the machine myself a bit, plus making sure that I can train people up really quickly. So they're things I've got to think about. And that is my next cafe setup if I was going to take one on. Now, what do I need to consider when thinking about this cafe? Firstly, just think about space. Obviously, if I'm looking at a lease and you're looking at a new space, you've got to know that like a 3 group is going to fit multiple grinders. So let's just make sure space. So let's say I've got all the space in the world. Now we're going to think about power, water, and waste, and make sure the location has the power I need. Make sure I've got 32 amps. Some machines go up to 40 amps, and you need multiple power points. We're going to have many reasons for power and waste. I don't want to be emptying a bucket halfway through service, especially if I'm doing volume. So just the facilities need to be there, and let's just assume that they are all there and I can move on with my choices. Volume is measured. You'll hear us talk about kilos per week. It's a really common thing in the coffee industry. It's just easier than thinking about cups, but I think there's 3 main areas that I want to kind of consider. If I was doing less than 15 kilos a week, which is roughly about 600 cups a week, there's kind of a budget and some expectation that I would want out of that equipment. I've got to look at potentially a 15 to 30 kilo account. So if you're in that space, I'm going to give you a scenario of what equipment I would choose for that kind of volume. And then that's going to dictate, I guess, budgets and other things as well. And then I'm going to pitch a scenario where I've got somewhat unlimited budget and I'm doing kind of upwards of 2,500 cups a week or 30 kilos a week. Budget is definitely something we have to think about. It would be amazing to just go out and buy all the equipment you want, but let's also run smart businesses. Let's make sure we know what our overheads are, from our rent to our wage costs to our equipment costs. Maybe you can spread that out through some rentals or kind of soften the blow of the early initial investment of working with a roaster like us, that we can supply you equipment for your new cafe. So if you want any of this equipment in your cafe, definitely reach out and connect to me. I can help you get this equipment into your cafe. But if you were also looking at your budget, we want to make sure that it's not blowing out early and we're not making it hard for you to recover and start making some money. And on budget, we want to make sure that we are able to produce the coffee that we want to taste good. So I'm not really looking at equipment that I don't think is going to produce a good coffee. I am kind of got a model there that wants me to be fast and be busy, so I have to take those things into consideration, and there is going to be a budget that I have to set pretty early on. So not all equipment is going to really suit every cafe. The other thing about your budget is you got to think about the running cost. This is not just buying the equipment is just the initial cost. There is the installation cost, there is the maintenance, there is the servicing, and some machines definitely cost a lot more to maintain. Some grinders need the burrs replaced at 800 kilos, others at 2.5 ton of coffee. So you really need to consider those things, because there is ongoing running costs to certain equipment that you need to be aware of. I mentioned before, you got to think about your staff. How quickly can they learn how to use the equipment? Maybe once we start going like old school, we're hand tamping, we're taking away some of the automation, it is going to take longer to onboard them and train them. Getting new staff in there is going to be a little bit trickier. So I'm thinking about staff as well. If it's me on the machine, I'm a bit more comfortable, but do I want a new junior that could be more cost effective on there pumping out shots to have a hard time learning or have a long timeline? So in my cafes, I'm going to think about speed and efficiencies and where I can get those improvements really quickly for everyone. Brands is another thing. Am I using brands because I personally love them, or am I using brands because they're tried and tested? You got to think about brands that your technician is going to be comfortable with, that you're going to be comfortable with, that suit the coffee you're using. We definitely know certain equipment works well with our coffee, so you'd have to consider that. And with those brands, are you willing to go outside of your comfort zone and learn a bit about them? Definitely research all these different brands. Don't just take my word for it. Do your own research and look into all of them and get some advice for people. Definitely, if you can go into cafes and talk to baristas and talk to owners, that's a great thing. That's something that I've had, obviously, the background on of setting people up and knowing what works for cafes. Does it need to look a certain way? How big is my ego? Do I need it to be this beautiful, shiny machine, or is it about speed and efficiency? No, my ego is big enough that I'm going to make sure they're going to look beautiful on the bench. And we want them to speak specialty coffee, and we want them to be something that is a beautiful representation of the coffee in the cafe. It is just going to depend on your budget though. And lastly, have I got my priorities right? I mentioned it before. It's about speed, consistency, trainability. It's all of these elements, budget and stuff. Can I have it all? If you've got the budget, it gets a bit easier to afford to have all of these things because you can implement automation, you can make things easier for yourself. But when we don't have all the budget in the world to spend all the money, we've got to think about the things that are really going to get us what we want. I think base level, we want to make sure that our coffee tastes good. The speed is probably just a high priority on this list for me in this cafe. All right, so what is in the cafe? Firstly, I'm not going to do a cafe without a good clear bench space. We're going to get a nice setup. We're going to have a jug rinser, just a simple jug rinser, nice sink well, because I wouldn't be doing milk without that. I talked about a grab and go. We're talking about food too. So a Merry Chef would be a way that I would be able to heat and prepare food very quickly and get that out the door. So I want to be able to cook my food basically in the time that I make a coffee. So I can't really say that I'm a fast grab and go place and then have a slow sandwich press for my toasties. So I'm going to have all my meals prepped, but if I have to cook, I've got to save some budget for that Merry Chef. And speaking of that, the machine and the grinder isn't the only thing you spend money on. Think about the whole package deal. Think about your whole area. I'm definitely thinking about that speed and where I'm going to get that from. And one of the things is a batch brewer. So offering a filter coffee and having a batch brew, we're talking like, I don't know, $500 and you've got yourself a setup for a batch brew. That's going to make me faster to be able to get filter coffees straight out the door. So that's going to add speed, and it's also going to expand my menu and give me more options. On that, expand the menu even further, definitely having an ice machine so that I can be offering a really quick cold drink offering. Ice cube trays just suck. They're just slow, they're clunky, and they work. So having a good ice machine in your workflow is definitely going to help and something to work into the budget. Obviously, you got to think about your fridges. I'm underbench fridges is definitely what I would have. I would have them accessible on the milk side. I need to be able to store 2 crates of milk in there, alternative milks and other things. So it's often an afterthought. I definitely would want to work that into my drawings and my plan and my layout because if I'm offering a range of cold drinks, I want to be able to access my syrups and everything else as well. And then lastly, I'm not going to make coffee without an auto temp. If we're talking about all the variables of making coffee, it would definitely having an auto temp in the mix. The difference between a upright auto temp that just sits on your bench or an under grinder auto temp, I actually just prefer the freestanding ones. They're much more serviceable. They're just as solid. I mean, I'm a tall guy and I could probably handle it, but you put a grinder on top of a temp that's underneath the grinder, it does make the grinder quite high, and especially if you've got scales or anything, it can be quite difficult for a shorter barista to use. So I'm mindful of that. There is a bigger cost to the under grinder temp. Remember I said I've got all the bench space I need. If I really was tight, I would look at an under grinder temp. But for now, I would just stick with something like the Cinewhite PT2 that just stands on the bench by itself. Super reliable piece of equipment. So no matter what setup, I've got clean jugs in my rinser. I've got my auto temp ready to go, and it's just ruling out one of the variables. I can save myself some money on that, but if one of my variables is consistency, I'm not going to skimp on my auto temp. All right, so let's look at our cafe. My cafe, if I'm kind of thinking I'm going to do less than 15 kilos a week, obviously my goal would be doing a lot more, but this could be a stepping stone to get me in and get me open. So therefore, if my budget's kind of less than 20 grand, almost around that 15 grand mark, I've got to look at single boiler machines. I just do, because you've got to be looking at upwards of 15 to 20 grand to go into the dual boiler market. I think that right now the best value for money on a single boiler machine would be something like the Rocket Boxer. I could go for the 2 group option. Has quite a large boiler for that style of machine. If I go to the 3 group, I don't add too much cost, but I do get a bigger boiler and a bit more steam pressure and access to that head. But under 15 kilos a week, kind of talking 600 cups a week, it's very manageable. When we do talk about volume, we've got to think about how fast we're going to pump out those coffees together though. Are you doing that over the course of a full day, or do you need that machine to keep up with you in a really short amount of time? So let's say we've got a single boiler machine, rocket boxes on the bench. Now we're thinking about grinders. I'm going to weigh my coffee. Again, like our auto tamp, I don't want to lose my ability to weigh my shots. Now, we've had great success with the Anfim SB2 and the scales and the dosing pot. That's been a great setup for us. I have looked at and do use the E65S, the Mahlkonig E65S, now in the grind by sink. Once you get to that, you get to the Markibar, Izaga, the grind by weight options. You start to spend a little bit more money on those grind by weights. We've got the Fiorenzato 64 grind by weight in that, which is more cost effective. Some of those do have a smaller burr set, so their grind time might be more like 6 to 8 seconds, depending on which one you go for, but that's kind of the range in that space for grinders, so I'd be considering that range for sure. One of the others I'd probably slip in there, if you wanted a conical burr, would be the Mazzer Robur SE, because you can actually retrofit a scales tray onto them. Again, you start to get into the higher price brackets, but if that's the style of coffee you want and you want the conical burrs as opposed to the flat burrs, that would be a good option for you. I would just want to be able to put the scales tray on there. So that's me set up, just getting started, opening the doors, and this might be you. You might be looking at just what can it take to get the doors open. Now I'm starting to build some real momentum, get my customers in. I'm looking at 15 to 30 kilos a week, and now I'm going to, maybe it's been a couple of years, or you just can reinvest and you're looking at a new set of equipment, and I'm spending less than 40 grand. So we don't have all the budget. I have to fit a bunch of stuff in, but now I can look at dual boiler machines. I'm going to move up to a 3 group Marzocco PB. This is the machine that I think has been taken on the industry as, it's definitely a workhorse. They've been around long enough to know that they've proved themselves that they can work really hard and do volume, but they also get real consistency. I've personally worked on many of them from a serviceability point of view. They're very manageable for a tech to jump in there and isolate steam ones. You can do some of the, like, change your own seals and those kind of things. And I trust the flow of them to give me an optimal espresso and get great taste out of that coffee. So that's my preferred machine within this space for sure. What I'd want to do now is look at my grinder. So I didn't say before, but I just don't want to compensate on grinders getting super cheap. I'm not going to go into the Mazzer Jolly kind of world. I want to stay at a certain level. Now that I'm looking at doing like almost 30 kilos, going to a bigger burr set and getting that grind time down. The Mazzer Robur is a faster grind time, but maybe I want the flat burr. So I'm looking at something like the Mahlkonig E80. They just are a more expensive grinder to run and maintain. The burrs are more expensive. So maybe I'm looking at the Fiorenzato 83 grind by weight. That's going to give me a more cost-effective burr set. I'll get definitely more life out of that, and we just want to make sure the coffee tastes great with that. So that's another option, but I'm ultimately looking for a more powerful motor. I'm looking for a bigger burr set that's going to get me down to the 3 to 4 second grind time, and I'm maintaining that grind by weight function. The Izaga, Markibar Izaga is another one in that space where it does have, you know, that extra function where it drops down into my portafilter. I just have to make sure that I'm only turning that on when I'm busy, so I don't have that pre-ground kind of sitting there for too long. But that's definitely in this space of being fast and maintaining a good quality espresso the whole time. I also want to expand my menu by being able to offer more single origins and retail coffee. So I'm going to have a second grinder in this range, in this budget, where I'm doing an EK43. It's going to give me the option to put retail coffee through, and I can have a range of single origins or other blends or other feature roasters in there that I want to do. And with good workflow, I'm not going to slow myself down too much, but I'm going to expand my menu for sure. Now, I haven't mentioned milk systems yet. Now, this could be the Marzocco Wally, it could be an Uber Milk, or it could be a latte art factory. And so far, within this volume, everything I'm talking about doing is very possible with 2 baristas on the machine. Even having, you know, a grind by weight grinder and a fast barista can be enough. If you learn to hang your jugs, that's great. But right now, we're talking about having 2 baristas on the machine, definitely between 15 and 30 kilos, so we can, you know, pump out the coffees, that speed. So having 2 people on is just that much faster. I haven't introduced a milk system because we're talking, you know, 8 grand plus all the way up to like 20 grams for these systems, and it's just out of the budget. Now, let's start talking about if I have somewhat infinite budget, if I know that I'm taking on a location, I have to hit those numbers. I'm doing upwards of 30 kilos, potentially 50, 60, 100 kilos. What would it really take? I know that we've got accounts doing 100 kilos on a 3-group PB with dosing pots and scales. It can be done. What would I do? I would actually keep my Marzocco Linea PB. I have the option to go to an ABR, but I actually probably would have preferred the ABR at the slower volume, because if my concept was focused on delicious espresso and really dialing in and making sure I'm on point. But once we start talking about speed and flow, the Linea PB, I'm confident is going to maintain the flow and extractions. ABR is auto brew ratio. It will basically cut your shots off when the scale tells you your cup is full. Amazing technology, produces great tasting coffee. However, if I'm doing 70 kilos of coffee, I need to be able to press my button before I put my cup down. I can't do that with the ABR. So it's just a consideration. I would probably take that away. It's also a higher cost to me to maintain the ABR, so I'm going to consider that. Do I really need it? I think I'm going to get the speed without it. So I'm going to leave the ABR off. So I'm keeping my Linea PB on the bench. Why would I not go to a Strata or a KB90? I mean, there are other great brands out there. You could be looking at the San Remo, Cafe Racer range, or all of these. I love the PB, so I'm staying there. KB90 would be lovely, but again, I'm really adding more costs. The straight imported filters are great. There's some great technology in there, but these are the things you've got to decide what you value more. And right now, I'm finding that sweet spot with the PB. But if I'm pairing that with a Mahlkonig E80 grind by sync, or again, we've got the Fiorenzato 83 grind by weight grinder, or the Izaga is going to give us that huge volume that we can get through. They're some of the biggest grinders out there. They're going to give you the speed and quality. Once you get to that volume, your concern is really around heat retention and management of that. So these grinders are built for that speed and efficiencies. Mazzer Robur would be another one to put back in there if you want the conical burrs, but I'm still within that high quality, fast grinder space. All right, so I mentioned before that I'd have an EK43 so I can offer that retail. That's cool. I can expand my menu to have the EK43 in my big account as well, so I can chuck some beans through. It's not as fast as just a standard grinder, and if I'm doing 50 kilos, I'm probably doing a couple of kilos a week of single origin in itself, especially if I add that to the menu as my go-to for long blacks. So I'd be introducing one of my other grinders. I don't need like the E80 or a big burr set. I could go back to the E65S. I wouldn't do the Izaga. I wouldn't do like a pre-dose thing because it's not about speed. Now it's about getting high quality coffee out of that. I do like the Anfim range. They've always been a great thing for us. I'd be looking at a flat burr grinder like the SP2 or the Fiorenzato 64 grind by weight would be a great thing. Again, I'm maintaining that grind by weight, but what I'm trying to do is just having a second grinder dedicated to single so I can pump that out, and I've still got my EK43 Mahlkonig to be able to put retail and other blends and other singles through too. All right, and this budget is going to allow me to introduce my milk system. Now, the first milk system that I look at introducing would be the Marzocco Wally. This means that I can spin a bunch of different milks. It's going to give me like that second set of hands, and I can improve my speed with that, with the Marzocco Wally for sure. It's something that other staff could pick up really quickly. They could be spinning beautiful silky milk without doing it themselves. Or if I come in and open early and it's just me, I've got that extra set of hands. The Wally really helps to just take some pressure off the barista, gives them the ability to go take an order while the shot's pouring and the milk's spinning. So the Wally's going to take some pressure off you for sure. Once I start looking at those bigger volumes and like, 3,000 plus cups a week, I would be looking at an Uber Milk. I'd be looking at a hot milk dispensing system. Now this, controversial, who knows? I think we've come a long way in coffee. I think I'd still be spinning milk. You can't avoid that. Mindful that Uber Milk really only does one milk. It kind of does one texture. So I don't love that. I would probably do it if I was doing 60, 80 plus kilos so that I can just do all my flat whites, maybe my lattes in one texture, and it's all my full cream milk. But I'd definitely still be spinning milk. With those hot milk systems, they really take some pressure off the time spinning milk. So if I had all the budget, I've got my 3-group PB, I've got my high-end grinder, grind by weight, and a milk system, and my full bar setup. So a lot of this equipment is listed on our site. We'll put some links in the description. You can have a look at them. Put your comments in. We'll try to answer them. Tell us what is in your bar. If you'd like to speak to me directly about helping you source this equipment, maybe we can supply it if you're using our coffee in your cafe. That is something we can do for Australian cafes. So definitely reach out to us if we can help you with that. Or if you want to buy your own equipment for your own cafe, you don't have to use our coffee. We support cafes all around Australia with equipment, so definitely reach out and we can get quotes and work out whether that equipment is the most suitable for your cafe. Are you running a cafe like me? Is this your new venture or are you looking to upgrade? I hope this has given you something to think about. Definitely excites me to think about setting up an account with this equipment and that I could achieve the results that I want with this equipment. So hopefully this has been helpful. I appreciate you watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.